All right, it's been a while since I've done one of these, but I wanted to give an update on how Brewmaster's looking in terms of Mythic Plus for the season. We are approaching 11.1.7, which will be the final patch. And with that, we're going to gain one last little power spike with the Overcharged Delve Belt. But for the most part, we're kind of reaching the midpoint with Dinars. People are really rounding out their gear. Most weekly vaults are kind of coming down to you're probably taking sockets or not even filling your vault completely from week to week. So I just wanted to kind of round out the season by giving one last kind of maybe final update on how they're performing in Mythic Plus. I'm not going to talk about Raid too much because I don't really care about Raid. Plus, Raid's kind of done and over with. But let's take a look at a couple different sites, including Murloc.io. We're going to look at some stats from just Archon as well as Raider.io. So regarding the meta, it's clear to most players that VDHs have been pretty dominant. But what I find interesting is you are going to see a couple of sprinkles of green. This is the current leaderboard of tanks in all regions. And so you have both Poa and Monksy on the front page, and Mordrum is actually close behind. There's obviously a lot of DHs in between, and you're actually seeing some play from a couple of Chinese region monks as well. So as you scroll, it's obviously littered with purple, but monks do have a place at the top end of play currently, and that's mostly going to come down to the physical composition. I've been thinking about doing a video on the physical comp and talking about its strengths and weaknesses. If you're interested in hearing me rant about that, let me know in the comments below. But what I find the most interesting about this is how metas develop across regions. So first, when you look at Europe, you're going to see something very similar, where it's going to be mostly DHs as well as a couple of monks, Mordrum and Monksy kind of making their way in to the top 40. You're going to see a very similar thing represented in the Chinese region, except this time you're actually seeing a lot more warriors than you are monks, for example. So the physical comp is relatively respected over there. I'm not sure about these players as much, but it's funny when you actually move over to the US meta or the US leaderboard, you're going to see a lot more of that physical damage representation with both monk, warrior, and guardian druid being represented in the top 40. You have 2 guardian druids, you have 5 or 6 warriors, as well as 1 brewmaster. As soon as you move on to page 2, you're going to see a couple of warriors, a couple of monks as well, and you're going to see a little bit more of representation of that physical comp. So while brewmaster is niche, it is actually doing really, really well this season when it has the right comp to play with. Now, as for statistics, you're actually seeing that Brewmaster is sitting healthy in like a mid A tier. While there is a meta tank, these 3 classes have things that are working for them, whether it's the buffs they bring, the pull size they're able to do, or just maybe their damage palette. The Guardian Druid and the Protection Warrior, similar to the VDH, has the ability to do these insanely large pulls. Brewmaster will struggle a little bit more with these larger pulls, but you're generally playing with a composition that prefers they can do more damage in kind of smaller subsets of trash pulls. When we're looking at total damage being done, though, Master of Harmony and Shadowpan are relatively equal. They are about 60k difference between the two. You're generally going to find more consistent Shadowpan damage in single target, where Master of Harmony is generally going to shine better in AoE and more consistent. The other thing, too, is if you play around Master of Harmony properly, you can get really good burst damage going into a boss fight or for specific moments in the boss fight. And Shadowpan still has a lot of bugs with it, from your Flurry Strikes not registering for against all odds, them not registering at all. There's just the frontal facing action of it. It's just Shadowpan tends to be a little bit weaker or a little bit more buggy than Master of Harmony. So it's been a choice for most of the top Brewmaster monks. But as you can see, despite them being kind of middle of the pack in terms of damage, they are completing some of the highest level keys, which was reflected on the IO leaderboards. Now, in terms of popularity, they are still by far the least popular spec. There's a lot of reasons for that. Some of the fact comes down to it's a fairly complicated playstyle. You need a very specific comp for it. It does take a lot of practice. It's very finicky in terms of how its cooldowns operate in Mythic Plus. Its toolkit generally overlaps with a lot of other toolkits, so you end up getting things like diminishing returns. Ring of Peace is kind of awkward to use. There's a lot of reasons why Brewmaster Monk isn't popular. But it's still actually doing really well for the few people who are sticking with it. And you can boil that down to maybe the people who are playing it are more comfortable with the specialization or have been playing it, or they're kind of, I don't want to call them one tricks, but people who are just so engrossed into the class's ability or play style that they spend all day playing it. So last but not least, we're gonna quickly talk about the builds and what people are leaning towards. As I predicted way back at the start of the season, as we saw an increase in secondary stats and main stat, we did see a pretty massive shift over to Master of Harmony. Master of Harmony is now mostly a 60 to 40 representation over Shadowpan, and you're seeing the majority of the top monks play it. In the top 5 currently on live, not counting Chinese regions, we're seeing 4 of the 5 playing Master of Harmony. When we get to the next 5, we're seeing Master of Harmony still being represented by 40% here. And then as you go down, you're just going to see more and more players playing Master of Harmony. Now, does this really change anything? Not really in terms of stats. You're still going to be stacking a lot of crit and a lot of versatility. And a handful of mastery. The average Brewmaster is running about 7,000 mastery. This is going to come from various sources, including trinkets, rings, and the tier armor that you're being forced to wear. Now, the big thing that came into play a couple of weeks ago was Dinar. Dinar is a thing in-game that allows you to buy any gear you want. Well, not any gear, but it allows you to buy gear from a vendor right outside of the bank or the Great Vault area. By killing raid bosses or completing mythic dungeons, you'll unlock a gear. Now, of course, if you do clear the full raid, I just cleared it a couple weeks ago or last week, I don't remember. I'm able to buy mythic raid loot, which is awesome. But if you at least achieve, I believe it's 3 KIO, you're able to buy mythic trinkets. So a lot of people have been asking me what they should buy. So there's a lot of things that I would recommend buying. Now, if you're going the way of the quote-unquote Brewmaster meta and you're looking to play Master of Harmony, you have kind of 2 options or 3 options, depending on if you raid or not. I'm mostly going to talk about Mythic Plus, though. It seems like most players across the board are playing in Improvised C4 and Pacemaker. Now, this trinket is insanely good. You're going to pretty much have 50% uptime on this at all times. It's giving you a massive amount of critical strike, bringing you up to that 39% benchmark that you want to hit. It's giving you main stat as its stat stick, which is obviously really good, improving the potency of your spells as well as your stagger effectiveness. So I would say if you don't have a mythic pacemaker and you've hit 3 KIO, I recommend that this would be the thing you buy. This trinket is insanely powerful. I do have one on the mythic track. I ended up getting it from my vault a couple of weeks ago, I believe, or I don't remember if I bought it or not. I did spend Dinar at some point. But this is the go-to trinket. If you can get on the mythic track, great. The hero track is also fine. If you're someone who is, you're dabbling in Brewmaster as an alt, or you're doing, you're just planning on doing 10s or 12s or 14s, having a heroic version of this is way better than not having it at all. Now, as for the next trinket people run, you're going to see a lot of players running Signet of the Priory. Now, there's 2 cases where you're going to end up wanting to run this trinket. It's only when you're playing Master of Harmony. And the reason for this, or at least the main reason, is that when you're playing Master of Harmony and you're not playing Chi Surge, your Weapons of Order cooldown is a flat 2 minutes. Which means that it syncs up with your trinket, making your Weapons of Order window extremely potent. You're not only going to have the 9% mastery, you're going to have ramping damage, and you're getting a massive 10% versatility increase, which is 10% damage, and 5% damage reduction. So when you pair it with this, Weapons of Order is actually going to feel potent. If you're like me and you're stubborn and you stick with Shadowpan, not only do you have a option to run Chi Surge, which does give you cooldown reduction, but you're also getting cooldown reduction from efficient training. Every 50 energy you spend, it's going to reduce Weapons of Order cooldown by 1 second. This is going to give you 20 to 30 seconds off the CD, and then you're going to get an additional time off from Chi Surge. So this is why Shadowpan mostly doesn't run this trinket, because it desyncs. The trinket by itself is pretty beans. The Weapons of Order cooldown by itself is pretty beans. When you pair them together, it's great, but when they're desynced, they don't really have that much value, or they don't really have a leg to stand on. So if you're playing Master of Harmony, these 2 trinkets are probably your best bet. Now, there are times where some Brewmaster monks will not run Signet of the Priory because they need a more defensive option. And that will come in the place of ringing Ritual Mud. So this is a trinket that also comes from dungeons. Again, this is more of a fill-in. It's a thing you want in your tanking arsenal, but doesn't necessarily mean you have to run it. This trinket unfortunately doesn't interact with stagger, but there are a ton of different damage over time effects from dungeons that are going to get applied to you that it will benefit from. It also gives you an extra button to hit when you don't have a defensive. you can use it before or after using Dampen Harm or Fortifying Brew. It's going to make things like Big Mama and Swamp Face fights really easy. Or easier, I should say. It's going to make the first pull of Cinder Brew Meadery also feel a little bit better to do. There's different instances where some brewmasters might swap out their Signet for this, or actually, that's pretty much it. So if you're going to buy any trinkets, I would say probably improve Sephorian Pacemaker, and then if you're planning on playing Master of Harmony, Signet is a really good choice. If you're someone like me and you really like Shadowpan and you want to stick to it, you can forego getting that and get the Ringing Ritual Mud instead. Now you'll notice some people are using Tome of Light's Devotion. This is generally a raid trinket, and if it is popping up in Raider.io, chances are the top brewmaster was maybe raiding and they logged off in the raid gear, and when the API updated, it just scanned their character and it had Tome of Light's Devotion on. Now when it comes to Combustible Bomb Suit, you can see that there's one and only monk running it. I'm running it, and it's mostly, there's a couple of reasons for this. Having a defensive option from the raid is great, but sometimes me being a little bit more tanky and sacrificing a little bit of damage allows my DPS and my healer to focus on keeping the group alive and doing more damage themselves. So there's like this weird trade-off that's happening here. I don't recommend getting Combustible Bomb Suit unless you have access to it. Now, kind of the last thing I want to talk about really quick, actually there's a few things. When it comes to our Helm enchant that you get from Horrific Visions, most people are running Void Ritual. This is going to give you ramping secondary stats. The uptime is pretty decent on it. It's going to both offer like offensive and defensive value. This is probably the go-to. Now, Rune of Echoing Void, people who are running this basically saw Sims and said, I'm going to run this. It's over simming. It's not performing all that well. Do not run Rune of Echoing Void. Now, some players are running Twilight Devastation, myself included. This is going to give you some pure damage. It's a little RNG, but it's about 3.5% over the course of a key. If you're someone like me who runs double defensive trinkets, you could run Twilight Dev for a little bit extra damage to make up for the fact that you're running double defensive trinkets. But generally speaking, Void Ritual is going to be the play. Echoing Void was over simming. It's not doing that well. I don't know if it's bugged or if it's just meant to be like that. Don't run Echoing Void. The last thing I've noticed some players running actually comes back to our talents. People have started running Expeditious Fortification, which is interesting because it reduces your fortifying brew by 2 minutes, reducing it from a 6 to a 4-minute cooldown. Of course, this is a brew, so it's benefiting from cooldown reduction. And while you're not going to gain the additional health and DR from Iron Shell brew, it does allow you to have this active more often, which in conjunction with Determination, a talent in our spec tree, this is allowing you to just have more effectiveness on stagger, giving you better high tolerance. But basically, you're able to have higher uptime on Fortifying Brew, which overall could be better in some cases. I can't really recommend a certain time to run this or not to. The top 2 monks, along with some other players, Poa and Monksy and then some other guys, are running Expeditious. And then a lot of other people are still running Iron Shell Brew. So it might be on a dungeon to dungeon basis. It might be based on feeling. It might just be they forgot to change it back. Not really sure what's going on there. But that was something interesting to kind of note. Now, last but not least, we are getting a new belt in a couple weeks. I already did a video talking about it. It got a lot of traction. I think a lot of people ended up watching this video who weren't Brewmaster players. It was meant to be from a Brewmaster's perspective. But basically, I'm going to also include it in this video a little bit. If you want my full thoughts, go watch that if you haven't seen it. But basically, we're getting a belt that may replace Adrenal Surge Clasp, which might open us up to running some different embellishments. Ascendance is probably a fine option. There are some arguments to run like Dusk Thread or Dawn Thread on some of your gear instead. But chances are when the belt is maxed out a few weeks after 11.1.7 launches, chances are we're going to be saying goodbye to our General Surge Clasp. So yeah, that's a little unfortunate news. This is a very good embellishment and has scaled very well. Chances are you'll still want to hold on to the belt because you'll probably use it next patch unless they end up putting out a new embellishment at the end of 11.2. So we'll see. Anyways, that's pretty much it. I just wanted to give a nice big update on Brewmaster and how it's performing. It's doing very well. It's a very fun tank to play. Getting ready for 11.2, which is the next patch. We don't know anything about it yet, but it is around the corner. And so if there is any type of guide for Brewmaster you would be interested in me making, let me know. I've done things talking about like weapons and damage guides and threat kind of suggestions. But if there's anything that I missed or maybe you have a question about, let me know down below as well. And hopefully I can get around to making that sooner than later before 11.2 hits and I get swamped with PTR testing and all that stuff. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I will catch you all in the next one. Peace.